In this video, we will talk about the most important facets of blended learning and central aspects of the implementation. There are several common myths about blended learning. It is impossible because I would need much more time to convey the content, the students are learning less in online phases and are left to themselves, I have too little direct contact with my students, I have too many students in my course, it is very laborious to create the online contents and I don't know how to do it, I can convey only theory at most, and so on. I will further enter into those myths later in the video, but firstly I will explain what blended learning actually is. The concept behind it is unclearly defined, but here are the most important aspects to describe it. It is an integrated learning experience that is the sensibly coordinated linking of online and face-to-face teaching. There are three different examples. An online phase as a preparation for a face-to-face course. It is also called flipped classroom. An online phase as a follow-up to a classroom event. Or online elements during a classroom event. Those phases can be combined in any way, so you could, for example, have an online phase as a preparation for a face-to-face course and afterwards offer a follow-up phase. Technology that supports personalized active learning plays an important role. Active, self-directed learning is a central aspect of blended learning and is especially important because learners can determine more when, what, and how to learn and in what time. Face-to-face or synchronous sessions are used for active and cooperative learning and exchange instead of a passive lecture. Asynchronous online phases are designed actively and cooperatively. The role of the teachers is to support learners in the learning process. Here is a concrete example for it. Let's say there is a face-to-face course and we would like to restructure it into a blended learning format with an asynchronous online phase and a synchronous face-to-face course. Of course, it would be an easy possibility to record a course or to provide reading material for the students and can therefore win time to give another lecture face-to-face. But this is no real blended learning format because the active self-directed learning is missing. The asynchronous phase is completely passive and the asynchronous and synchronous phase are not sensibly combined and don't build on each other. Another possibility would be to enrich the synchronous course by integrating, for example, a voting system that allows students to answer questions during the course. It surely is a more active learning than just a purely frontal lecture, but it is more a digital enrichment of a face-to-face course than a blended learning format. A good possibility would be to start with an online learning phase instead of a face-to-face course. There could be short video sequences linked to quizzes and tasks for the students. This enables them to work out the contents themselves interactively or maybe even cooperatively in small groups and to check by themselves what they have learned. This serves as a preparation for a face-to-face course where you can make, depending on the group size, a course with smaller groups or an interactive synchronous lesson with team-based learning if there is a higher number of students. So, coming back to the myths. You don't necessarily need more time, you just use it differently. For the second myth, actually, the opposite is the case. The students can be accompanied better and more individually than during a lecture. The follow-up is more individual as well, because many questions only occur during this phase. Regarding the big number of students, blended learning is also possible with big group sizes, for example with formats like team-based learning. Yes, it is surely initially more laborious to create the online content, but many resources already exist, for example open educational resources which you can build on or use. Furthermore, there's additional support and special training of the faculty. About the theory, oftentimes blended learning is more effective than traditional teaching at the knowledge level, but it also works for skills. It is important that the interactive and cooperative learning is supported. When it comes to the implementation, there are a few things that you should pay attention to. It is important to carefully plan out the restructuring of the learning courses and of the learning objectives. You should also always keep in mind the workload of the student, so the online phases should not be on top of a face-to-face course. You have to put many thoughts into how you can fill the spare time between online and face-to-face phases most effectively. Regarding technologies, you should think about what platforms, tools, and learning activities are most suitable for the planned, active, asynchronous learning. You can also get support from the faculty. For the face-to-face lessons, it is important to think of formats that enable active learning but are also suitable to the group size. It is very important to involve the target group, in this case the students, into the planning and conception of blended learning lessons. In the planning and conception phase, the feedback of the students is very important. It could also be useful to think about possible changes and adjustments of the exams, because sometimes the learning objectives and methods are changed. You should allow enough time for the students to edit the tasks during the online phase, which is usually a few days. In the following, we would like to give you an example of a blended learning unit from the DIDAC curriculum. The learning unit on health professions roles and clinical reasoning is organized in 2 phases. Phase 1 is an asynchronous online preparation in Moodle, followed by Phase 2, which is a synchronous meeting with a tutor and all course participants. In Phase 1, learners are familiarized with the learning objectives of this learning unit and then watch several videos on how clinical reasoning is conceptualized in the different health professions, for example physicians, nurses, occupational therapy and physiotherapy. This is followed by a clinical scenario in which learners are supposed to apply what they have learned in the videos. The last part is a preparatory homework for Phase 2. Phase 2 starts with clarifying open questions of the learners and a discussion of what they have learned in Phase 1. The main part of this phase is dedicated to the work in small groups on a clinical case vignette, in which learners are asked to identify relevant health professions and their responsibilities in this case. The learning unit is closed by the small groups presenting and discussing the results. Thank you for watching the video. We hope that it makes it easier for you to implement blended learning into your lessons.